police say they were gagged by the Crown Prosecution Service and warned to hold back from releasing vital information about the Southport killer, Axel Rudakubana.
Well, this comes as the Prime Minister has revealed plans to redefine terror in the wake of the Southport attacks, despite warnings it could overwhelm the police and security service.
Axel Rudakabana was referred to the government's counter-terrorism Prevent programme 3 times, but each time it was decided it was inappropriate for him to be taken under their wing.
Well, last night, GB News spoke to former Prevent practitioner and former counter-extremism coordinator about why Prevent didn't pick this case up.
I believe that this is an incompetence, yes, and I believe that the incompetence around clashing ideologies, colliding ideologies is quite broad, and we're seeing young men in particular alone in front of the computer, not being radicalised into any particular ideology, but just being fascinated by violence. And where do we put that? Where does that land? I think it should land, in this case, definitely with Prevent, but sometimes the ideology is really unclear. Well, how come child services with 4 or 5 phone calls didn't pick this up? Maybe there needs to be more on people who are just fascinated with violence.
What do you do? What is the answer to all of this? Former Scotland Yard detective Peter Blexley, maybe he has it. Good morning, Peter. This awful, disturbing situation, and why we even, I don't know what's to be done about this Axel Rudakabana, but what an evil little runt he is. What would you have done with him?
Well, already what we're seeing is a very undignified finger-pointing by various organisations, and this will continue as members of the establishment try to wriggle free from their responsibilities and their lamentable failings by saying it wasn't our fault, it wasn't our fault, it was all down to somebody else. Well, this public inquiry will, and we can almost write the conclusions now, inevitably find that there was failings. And we will hear that revolting phrase, lessons have been learned. But that will all be too late, because Rudukabana was allowed to carry out his acts of terror and murder on the streets of Britain, creating so many victims, enduring hurt and pain, and quite frankly, what has gone before in regards to this dreadful young man was simply not good enough.
What do you make, Peter, of Merseyside police claiming they were gagged by the CPS about releasing what they saw as vital information about Axel Rudukabana?
Well, maybe they were, maybe they weren't. This will all form part of this very undignified, I use that word again, inquiry, as people try to deflect from their own accountability and responsibilities. And this is endemic within the British establishment these days. We've seen it only so clearly shown with the dreadful rape grooming gags scandal, as everybody tries to scuttle under the skirting boards and deny responsibility for not doing their jobs properly. And clearly in this case, I think there will be shortcomings with education, health, Prevent programme, of course, law enforcement, parenting, and possibly more. This young brute should have been stopped and shouldn't have gone on to commit his reign of terror and murderous atrocities.
I think that's very well summed up and put, and you point the finger at a lot of the areas and the people responsible for all of this. It still leaves us with a problem, and the sentencing will take place tomorrow as to what will be done with him. He can't undergo a full life sentence because he was too young, apparently, to know what he was up to or what he was doing. But it seems this guy knew exactly what he was doing for a long time.
And he planned it, and he plotted it. And clearly by possessing ricin, he intended to commit even worse atrocities and potentially take even more lives. You're absolutely right when you say he won't receive a full life term, because there are factors that he simply doesn't hit, as astonishing as that is. But I hope that long after I've turned my toes up and departed this planet, people like the parole board and others ensure that this absolute monster never tastes freedom again and dies in captivity, because that is what he deserves.
Peter, in your experience, how quickly would those police officers in Merseyside have found that terror document and the presence of ricin in Rudukabana's home?
Searching his home address after he'd been arrested and that address had been identified would have been an absolute priority for the police. And once ricin had been discovered, then the Home Office and other departments like the security services and counter-terrorism police would have been notified very, very early. We know what happened as a result of Rudukabana's murderous rampage. People rioted on the streets of Britain, which I am never going to condone. But what happened, unfortunately, was that the establishment tried to suppress the truth and allowed other untruths to circulate, which caused a lot of bad feeling, a lot of tempers were raised, and we saw the unforgivable rioting then occur. The state needs to learn that suppressing the truth is a very bad thing to do in circumstances such as this. There should have been clearer messaging, more information got out there in a swift and timely manner, and then all the consequent rioting might have been prevented. The establishment needs to hold its head in shame over this, and those people that need to be held accountable should be. But I've already heard voices on the Liberal left already saying, oh, there was nothing that could have been done. Well, that is absolute hogwash. To use a phrase of a former Labour Home Secretary, David Blunkett, when he launched the Serious and Organised Crime Agency, he said he wants people in law enforcement to be lawfully audacious. And if they had been in this case, then maybe these murders could have been prevented.
Peter, we're almost out of time with you, but just wanted to ask, what do you think could have been done then? Could something have been done before he was charged with anything? Could we have perhaps received more information then?
Well, the messaging is, generally speaking, led by the senior investigating officer. But if it turns out that Merseyside police were gagged by the Crown Prosecution Service, we'd want to know who it was that imposed that gagging order, why they did it, what their name is, and let's hold them accountable.
Yeah, I agree with you there. We had the Prime Minister giving his excuses yesterday, but he's a lawyer. He speaks as a lawyer. He speaks on behalf of the Crown Prosecution Service, and there's no doubt that the effect of what they implemented just had horrendous consequences. It made an awful situation worse because of the disturbances on the street. What a mess what-a-mess And Claire, the first thing you want to highlight is this character, Axel Rudakabana, and where he got his killing knife from.
Right, so he got it from Amazon. Right, it really shouldn't be front page news because, let me just tell you, I've done some research into this, and the Ben Kinsella Trust that's set up because of the death, obviously, of Ben Kinsella in 2018 with a knife, nothing's been done. The statistics for the year end to March 2023, 82% of teenage homicide victims were caused with a knife. That was up 73% in the previous year. This is incredible. We have known about this. There's new knife crime statistics that will be released by the government in January the 30th in a few days' time. What on earth are they going to see? Why are we so surprised? We have been telling everybody, we've been speaking about this for a few years now. Knife crime is rampant. Sadiq Khan's not doing anything about it in London, and we really need to get a grip of this.
When you take away the personal touch, if you go to a shop and you would ask for the same thing, then there would be a barrier put up, but there's not. You can do it impersonally on the post. I remember being a kid, primary school, and summer holidays came, and we all had this craze about getting pen knives. You weren't allowed them. You couldn't. Every time we went to a shop, you were told no, you couldn't have that type thing. But here, this guy he was 16 when he got this murder weapon.
Yeah. And the other thing is that if you go, only a few months ago we were talking about how these kinds of knives are advertised on TikTok to children. There's got to be very few instances where somebody actually needs a specific kind of knife, apart from certain fishing and certain kind of labour. And I think maybe there's a licensing thing there. But, there's also another issue here that hasn't been talked about at all, actually, in the coverage this week about Southport, which is actually his mental health condition. And the reason I raise that is not as a kind of getting him out get him out of jail. You know, it's that he was very, very ill and was let down by multiple authorities and people working together that didn't recognise that he was a paranoid schizophrenic that was able to
None of that is down to the fact he used a knife and slaughtered.
No, but what I'm saying is,
I'm not saying it.
I'm not saying it for that, Claire. What I mean is there were many years of records of his behaviour and state of mind deteriorating, you know, and at the point at which he bought the knife, when somebody found it, that should have been an absolute red flag in terms of locking him up.
I think anyone that buys a knife like that, you only should really need them if you are a professional chef.
I agree.
If you work with them in your own home, but we need to attack and address the situation that young males are getting their hands on these and they're using them as a badge of honour. That's what needs to stop.
And you would think this would be a simple fix. Age verification on websites and also an algorithm that comes up if you are buying the ingredients for ricin and knives online. If one person is buying all of that, it can't
being
be
sent
for
to
good
the same
reason.
address.
Yeah, it can't be for a good reason.
Flag.
And it should be, shouldn't it?